A friend of mine who doesn't fly fish recently asked me one of the best questions I've ever been asked about fly fishing. Why should he try it? Fly fishing doesn't look easy, and to be honest, it's not the most effective way to catch a fish. Bait and lures both require a lot less effort, and they put the same fish in the net that fly fishing does. So why would you bother with fly fishing? What is it exactly that draws so many people to this sport? Why do some people obsess over bugs and hatch timings and tying their own flies and cramming fishing into every spare moment of their schedules? And why should you, someone who maybe doesn't fly fish or is just looking to get into it, give it a shot? Keep listening to find out. This is Untangled, fly fishing for everyone, presented by Ventures Fly Company. Hey everybody, welcome to it. This is Untangled, and I am your host, joined this week by none other than Alex Stulce.
Hey.
How's it going, Alex?
Good.
We need to have like a fancier title for you than just Chief Video Officer, don't we? Like Podcast Apprentice.
I like that.
Yeah? Podcast Apprentice.
Assistant to the podcast host.
Yeah. All right, Dwight. So, that makes me Michael Scott. I don't know how I feel about that. Oh, well, you know one thing Michael Scott probably would never try? He probably would never try fly fishing. I just never see that in his makeup as a character. But I know there's a lot of folks out there who are curious about fly fishing. What is it? Why would you even try this? I mean, you've got this super long pole that if you ain't careful, you're going to poke your eye out with it or you're going to break it. You got all this extra line. It's super easy to get tangled. But if you've seen any of the Instagram clips of fly fishing, or maybe you watched A River Runs Through It, which I hate that movie, by the way. I'll talk about that later. But I just want it on the record. I can't stand that show. But you see that, and maybe the allure of getting out there and like pitting your intelligence against that of a trout really appeals to you. You want to be in the river. You want to be surrounded by all the bugs and the fish. You want to be this bastion of knowledge standing there in the water like, oh, I know what's going on. You know, if that appeals to you as well, then I can understand why you'd be so interested in fly fishing. And that's actually what we're going to tackle today is why bother with fly fishing in the first place? What is this sport all about? Why does it, I really like the word enchant, even though it sounds like we're talking about a fairy tale. But seriously though, why does it enchant some people? And what can you expect if you decide to dip your toe, if you decide to be a toe dipper into the fly fishing world? What can you expect from this? And this entire topic was spurred by a question that a listener of the show sent in. A buddy of mine, his name's Jaden Warwood. I've known him since middle school, and with such a good last name like that, we always just called him Warwood. So it feels really weird to call him Jaden. You ever have friends like that, Alex?
Yeah, that's how I was actually. My name in high school was Stulce. No one called me Alex. In fact, I had people that would come up to me and someone would be like, "Hey, Alex," and they're like, "Who's Alex?" That's how common it was. So I get it.
Okay. So it wasn't just a weird me thing.
No.
Okay, good. Well,
if you have a good last name, use it.
Yeah, exactly. That's why people just point at me and say, "Hey, you," because neither of them work. But no, the question that Warwood sent in though really got me thinking, and I had a whole bunch of thoughts about it, and then Alex has a whole bunch of thoughts about it. But anyways, his question, he writes in and says, "Hey, Spencer, I love watching you on this channel and look forward to each weekly video, but it's kind of funny because I don't fly fish."
What?
Yeah, he doesn't fly fish.
Wow.
I remember I tried to get him to go fishing with me in high school.
Yeah.
And he was always like, "No, I'm going to go play Skyrim instead." And that's what he did.
All right.
I mean, you know, I don't blame him. We also had some epic Gears of War marathons too, back when that was a thing. But anyways, he doesn't fly fish. Back to Warwood's question. He says, "I got my fishing license again for the first time in probably 10 years and have been having a blast re-exploring the hobby, casting and reeling. I reeled in a nice big Arctic grayling up in the Uintas and have had fishing fever ever since. My question for you is, if you could seduce me off of my comfortable sitting rock that I love to cast and reel from and get me to wade into a river to sling a fly, what would you tell me? What are your personal pros and cons between the different methods of fishing? Love you, buddy, and hope you had a blast in Alaska. Your friend, Warwood. Really good question, huh?
Yeah, I love it.
There's a lot more to it here than I think he understands.
Agreed.
So we're going to dive into this. But first off, love you too, brother. Great to hear from you. Alaska was a lot of fun. I think he sent this question in before my last Alaska trip. Was August?
Yeah.
The last time I was there?
Yeah, we're jealous, so just keep going.
Oh, okay. You don't want to hear about the big Arctic
No,
grayling I
keep
caught?
Keep going.
Or the
Keep
Dolly
going.
Varden?
Keep going.
Okay. All right. First things first, so I love fly fishing, but I also love to fish with jigs, especially for bass. If I get to go out and jig for bass, I love that. My parents live in southern Utah. They live next to one of the better bass fisheries down there, and I like chucking jigs for bass every now and then. And I really love trolling for kokanee and lake trout. Cokes at the berry, man. It doesn't get better than Cokes at the berry. Little Utah joke for anybody from Utah listening in. But I prefer to fly fish because it's the most fun for me. Even though I enjoy all those other methods, I really enjoy fly fishing because I have the most fun doing that than I do just about anything else.
And in fact, I think a lot of people actually use spin casting or jigging as a springboard to get into fly fishing.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, the very first time I went out fishing, Berkeley and I, we loaded up our rods and tackle boxes. We threw them in the back of a bike trailer, and we biked down to this pond near our house. And
Craigster didn't take you guys?
No, he was working. It was just like a nice summer day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we biked down there. We had our snacks. We had some bait. We had our worms and our salmon eggs and all that. And we were sitting there on a rock and just had some bobbers out there, and we weren't catching a thing. But there was this guy right next to us, and he was killing it. Like, I kid you not, every 5 minutes he was pulling in a fish. And we just, that awkward moment when you just like keep looking over every time they catch a fish.
Yeah, you're looking over at him and you're hoping that he'll take pity on you because you don't want to say it yourself because that's the ultimate admission of defeat. Like, I can't even catch a fish. Can you help me, please? And yeah.
But this guy literally changed my life. He walked over to me in Berkeley and he was like, hey, you guys fish much? We're like, actually, this is like, we fish every once in a while, but this is kind of like our first time by ourselves.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, well, fishing's great. And he just like shared his excitement with us. And he set up our rods for us. And he just chucked out there. It was like one of those clear bubbles with like a swivel and a little bit of power bait. And he just chucked it out there. And we caught like 20 fish that afternoon.
Oh, yeah?
And that just sparked the fire. We went to that pond every single day that summer. And
how many fish did you kill that summer?
Probably a lot.
I'm sorry, that was a bad question.
But we loved it, man. Like we'd wake up in the morning, we'd load up the bike trailer, and we'd head down to the pond. And like, kudos on that guy for just taking time out of his day to help us kids. And that was the reason we started getting into fly fishing. And I mean, Craigster's fly fished. My dad, he's fly fished a lot, and so he kind of as we started to develop that excitement, he kind of funneled us into fly fishing, and now I started a fly fishing company, and I love fly fishing. Like it's my passion, and so that moment right there, that guy taking time out of his day, changed my life.
Yeah, well, I love that, and I think a lot of us probably have a very similar experience getting into this too. But you got into it because it was fun more than anything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's evolved over the years, why I like to fly fish. But that first little bit, I was like, oh, fish is biting, reel it in. Like, woo, this is a blast.
Yep. And I remember me and my best friend Lander, we used to go to Maple Lake is where we used to go back in the day. We'd skip class to go up there, and we would keep track of how many fish we could catch. And we were using power bait, and we were catching like, I think one day we caught like 53. And out of all those, we kept our limit, which was 4 each. So we kept 8. So what is that, 45 fish? Probably 40 of those died
Oh gosh.
because of, they swallow that
Yeah,
power bait all the way
yeah.
down there. But it was that same thing. We were just having a blast doing it. But it evolved for me as well. I think one thing I'd like to say, like set the stage a little bit before we go further in this conversation, is fly fishing has this reputation, and it's had it for forever, and I think it still has it. It's a very sophisticated, very upper crust sort of exclusive pursuit.
Highbrow.
Yeah.
Kind of like I'm
Yeah.
uppity. I like your word uppity.
Yeah.
You use that quite often.
You got to wear Lululemon. You definitely need a rod rack on your truck. And if it's not a Tacoma or a Subaru, then don't even show up to the river, right? It's sort of that attitude, that uppity attitude. And a lot of folks associate that yuppie granola munching Colorado hippie image with fly fishing. And then there's also a little bit of, we spend so much time talking about, well, fly fishing's amazing and it changes you and it changed me. And it almost comes off like this Zen-like magical healing experience. And for me, fly fishing is a lot of things, but I would never call it magical or healing or Zen-like. And I actually wrote about this a couple of weeks ago in Midcurrent because I think we get too caught up in the esoteric side of fly fishing.
All right, for all of us who are not English teachers,
Yes.
Can we get that definition?
Make sure I give you the dictionary definition, all right? Intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number of people with specialized knowledge or interest.
Okay.
Yeah. So we do kind of lean towards the esoteric side of fly fishing, I think, where
it's only for a limited amount of people.
Yeah, and we want to ascribe these certain things to it. And it's not fly fishing itself that will be this healing process. It can be, but I think for me, it is more the fact that you got off your butt, you went outside, and you did something. That's where the magic happens. It's not fly fishing itself. You could stand in the river and wave a stick and have the same experience because you're actually out there.
And a lot of times that's what happens, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't catch any fish, but you get back to the truck and you're like, man, that was a good day.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just, I think we project those attributes onto the sport sometimes, and that can make folks think that, oh, well, I'm not cut out for it, or that's weird. I don't want to do that. So if you're thinking about getting into fly fishing, I just want to make it very clear that you don't have to go into it expecting to become this pipe smoking, tweed clad, monocle wearing philosopher or anything like that. You just need to come into it wanting to have fun. And if you go into it, you want to have fun, you're going to get out of fly fishing what you put into it. So if the only reason you're there is to show off your new Helios or Winston or whatever, or your new fly flinger, okay, because those things look sharp. They're sleek, sexy fish catching machines now.
Amen.
Yeah, the new ones, they're beautiful. Piece of art is what they are. But if you want to show those off, if you're there to, well, I caught 25 fish today, all on dry flies, well, first off, no one's ever going to want to fish with you. Second, your tires might get slashed in the parking lot because it's easy to match the guy to the only Porsche in the parking lot too, which is something I see more and more in Utah now, is freaking those Porsche SUVs at the fly fishing turnouts. I just want to tell them, leave. Just go to Montana. That's where you belong. But anyways, I could do a whole podcast on that. The point is, you don't have to be into it for those reasons to enjoy it.
Well, and I think everyone is going to evolve into their own angler that they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know the word authenticity gets thrown around a lot these days, where it's like, you got to be your true authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets a bad rap, but I think the main principle does apply to this, where there are certain aspects of fly fishing that will call out to you, that you'll be drawn to. And I really think there's like two sides of this. Like, and I don't think it's like one side or the other. I think it's a spectrum where you're going to find yourself in between the two polar opposites. Like, like we've been talking about. You have that upper class snooty attitude, and then you have the trout bums that are like drinking their craft IPAs and they live for fishing. They are out there all the time. I think you can find a little balance in between there. You have people like Devin Olson over at Tactical Fly Fishing. He organizes his flies by grain. Like he literally weighs out his flies and organizes it. He's a very scientific angler. He's very meticulous in how he fishes. And then there's the other guys that go to the craft store and they find a feather and they tie it on a hook and they're like, I don't want to spend money on tying materials. And it's like that minimalist side. I think you can be right in the middle. You can be on one side or the other. You have people that only want to fish with guides. They want to go out on the drift boats and they want to catch as many fish as possible. And then you have the other guys that I feel like is more like us, where it's kind of like do it yourself. You go out there, you embrace the challenge. And
hey, I'd want a guide if you'd spring for it ever.
We can't afford that. Continuing. Just kidding. We'll probably do a couple this summer.
Yeah, I think we need to.
We're gonna try and get some epic bug footage and come out with a pretty cool fly selection bug course, masterclass type thing. So
stay tuned.
Yeah, it should be pretty cool. And then like dry flies, nymphing, streamers, Euro nymphing. Like, do you like fishing popular rivers with picky fish, or do you like going into the high mountain streams where those cutthroat are going to hit any fly that you throw out there?
Yeah.
And so there's just so many different aspects of fly fishing, and you just got to find what works for you.
Mm-hmm. No, you really do. That's what it boils down to more than anything else. Anyways, we spent all this time talking about this because Alex and I were talking about this before the show, and I really wanted to make sure that we communicated to folks who might be new to this sport that this isn't the highbrow endeavor that it might look like. You don't need to quote a famous fly fishing guide and high school graduate. You don't need gold bullion or hot dogs made with good pork to fly fish, right? You just need to enjoy it. And if you do that, you're doing fine. So the exclusivity aspect of this, just throw it out the window.
Spencer, what is the name of this show?
Untangled.
And?
Untangled, fly fishing for everyone.
Yeah. And I really think fly fishing is for everyone. Yeah. And that's part of our mission here at Ventures Fly Co.
Yep.
Is to not have that snooty attitude and to just let everybody enjoy this awesome sport.
Yeah. So definitely keep that in mind while I try to sell you on fly fishing, Warwood, and everybody else who's listening. We're not trying to get highbrow and exclusive on you. We're just trying to make this accessible like it actually is. So with that said, Warwood, you asked, how can I seduce you? And I love your word choice there. Which little nugget for the listeners. Warwood and I wrote a column in the school paper for how long were we on the paper? 2 or 3 years? I think 3. No, I don't know. A while. For all the time we were on the paper, we co-wrote a column every month. And our Halloween column was about how trick-or-treating is stupid because people who don't even try on their costumes still get candy, and you should only get candy if you actually put effort into your costumes. But we would use this fancy language and stuff. We did a Valentine's Day one. We used the word pulchritudinous to describe one of the girls in the school, and we got called down to the principal's office because, well, you can't print that. And I was like, do you know what pulchritudinous means, Mr. Principal? And he's like, well, no, but it sounds bad. And I'm like, so you let me get this straight. You're making 6 figures. You got a master's degree. And you don't know what that word means. And you don't know to look at Google to figure out what it means. It means pretty. All right, just in case so go home tonight to your wife and or your husband or whatever and say, yeah, you're very pulchritudinous, darling. Guarantee to win you some brownie points.
Good advice.
Yeah, anyways, Warwood and I would talk like that all the time. So a little tidbit of information there for you guys. It has nothing to do with fly fishing. It's just fun, I think. But how do we seduce them off the rock, Alex? What do we do with that? Well, I think you've got to acknowledge first the inherent differences between fly fishing and conventional fishing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're interesting because in fly fishing, you're using this long, heavy, this long rod and a heavier line to cast your fly, Whereas in conventional fishing, you're using a heavy rod and a light line to cast a lure. And it's kind of the two opposite extremes that really accomplish the same thing, which is catching a fish. And I just think that's an interesting difference between the two, an interesting way to realize that fly fishing is kind of the opposite in terms of the effort level, or not the effort level of the tools you're using to get the job done from conventional fishing. But what really gets me interested, right? What really brings me back to the sport is, like I mentioned at the beginning, I fly fish because I have a lot more fun doing it than anything else. Or would you mention sitting on your comfortable casting rock and just fishing? Well, I can last like 5 minutes doing that, maybe, if I'm lucky. How long could you sit there and just...
I can't stand it.
Yeah.
I actually had one of my church leaders, I was talking to him the other day, and this is actually a pretty similar experience that I have with most people when they're like, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" I'm like, "Oh, I have a little online fly fishing company."
Little? Come on.
And
we're at least medium.
I would consider us little. But they're like, "Oh yeah, that's really cool. I love fishing. I love just going out there and sitting on a chair and throwing out a worm." And I'm like, I can respect that, but I couldn't do that. I've done it, and I have to be moving, man. So when I started Ventures Fly Co., I was actually in the process of applying for medical school. And
which I don't think anybody on this show knows that about you.
Yeah.
Alex, your bachelor's is in what?
Biology and applied mathematics.
Yeah. And mine's in English. So talk about opposites, right? But no, I think that's really cool because that informs a lot of the way that you approach things.
I do. I'm a little more scientific, and I always talk about how my mind works like a flow chart. It's like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4.
Yep.
But when you're applying for medical school, there are prerequisites that you have to take in college in order to apply. And one of those is physics. And a lot of people, when I was getting into the class and I'm like, I'm signing up for physics, all my colleagues in that were applying for medical school too, they were like, "Oh man, physics is the worst. It sucks. You're going to hate it. Blah, 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 blah." And so I go into this class with just the attitude of, "Oh, this is going to be terrible." Dude, I freaking loved it. Physics is my favorite class in the whole world. Like, and I just love being able to, you have like equations. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like you have these tools that you can use to solve problems, but not every problem is the same. Like you have to use the tools and in a different way. You have to look at the problem and come about it from the back door a lot of the times. And that is one of the reasons why I love fly fishing, is because you have all of the same tools as everybody else, but sometimes you have to use them in a different way. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where I was going with this, but that is one of the reasons I love fly fish, is the problem solving aspect. Yeah. It's not me just, here we go. It's not just me sitting on a rock. Yeah. Like it's me using my brain. You have to analyze the water. We actually did a post on YouTube, a community post, and we asked everyone why they love to fly fish. Yeah. And I loved this comment. CBKE5XX, whoever you are.
Work on your usernames, people.
Like, I loved your comment because I feel like it encompasses everything that we love about fly fishing. He says, "It's relaxing. It's connecting with nature and disconnecting from work, cell phones, laptops, and technology. It's spending time with my brother, cousins, and my fly fishing buddies. It's going on an adventure, traveling to places I've never been. It's the adrenaline dump when all the hard work and money and prep pays off. When you hook into a nice wild fish and put them in the net. It's the
camaraderie.
The camaraderie." Again, sorry, everyone. We don't have that word in physics. Yeah.
Did they not make you take any English classes for med school?
Dude, I hated English, which is so funny. I couldn't stand it. It's the camaraderie of a post-river trip, beers around the campfire, watching the stars twinkle through the trees. It's feeling small in this vast natural world. It's appreciating the true beauty of these gorgeous fish and the stunning places they call home. And then here's what I like. It's the challenge of pushing yourself to take on a hobby that isn't easy. Learning how to tie flies, how to cast, how to study water, insects, analyze a river, e-scouting, and putting boots on the ground. It's that fist bump when your buddy lands a nice trout. All of it. Everything.
That's a really good answer.
I was pumped when I read that. I was like, amen.
Yeah. I'm worried about my job security now, to be honest. No, that was a really good answer.
CBKE5XX. If you're interested in hosting a podcast, you can reach out via email.
Yeah, sure. Oh no, I agree with that guy. There's an element of like the chase in fly fishing. You've got to really. It's a much more, and this is not to knock. Like I'm not sitting here like, oh, jig fishermen are stupid who don't know how to do anything. Like jigging is just different. It's a very repetitive motion a lot of times. Bait casting. I mean, you're still doing something, but to me, it doesn't feel like I'm as actively engaged in fly fishing as I am when I'm putting flies in front of, especially if I'm in front of rising fish and I'm putting flies in front of them. Usually you're not jigging to fish that you can see. You're blind fishing. You're jigging around structure and you think there's going to be a fish there, but you don't know it.
Yeah, you're prospecting.
Yeah. And so that active part of it is what really gets me into it. It engages me. And I personally have never experienced that with other forms of fishing, which is not to say that that it doesn't exist for some people, but for me personally, that's just not where it is. I mean, there's this one river in Utah that I've actually never fished with Alex or Berkeley yet because they refuse to go there when I want to go there. I'm always like, hey, let's go to the, wait, hold on, folks. I got a new toy. All right. Let's go to the and fish a little bit. Okay. Because I've been getting some flack lately from folks who say that I'm spot burning too much when I talk about the lower Provo in. Oh, sorry. Man, my timing with that is so bad. Darn it. Dang. Darn it. Anyways. Alex is over here waiting for the angry YouTube comments that he doesn't want to deal with. There's this river that it is crystal clear. It's this giant spring creek in the middle of a bunch of duck grass. And when I say crystal clear, it is like you can see everything. And there's one spot where I was with a buddy of mine and he caught a 28-inch rainbow out of this creek that's 15 feet wide.
That's wild.
Because the fish in there just eat each other. But there's a bigger fish in there next to the 20. The rainbow is the small one out of that group of fish that we caught. And you really have to sneak up on those. And when I say sneak up, like we were army crawling into position and we knew where the fish were because my buddy fishes it all the time. So he's like, yeah, they're right here. So it's like, okay. And he throws his line in there and hooks it. And sure enough, yeah, that's where it was. And I've been there since, and I haven't caught one of the big ones, but I've caught others from that river. And the fact that every time I go there, I have to be really sneaky, and I've got to be very careful at where I put myself. It's just, it's tough. I've got to get closer than I would with conventional gear. If I had a spinning rod, I could stand 30, 40 feet back, throw a cast up there, and plunk it through and catch the fish. It would probably be a little bit easier because I wouldn't need as much stealth.
Yeah. And finesse while fighting the fish.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's not a knock on conventional fishing at all. It's just fly fishing to catch these fish on a fly rod's harder. So, and harder might even be the wrong word. It's
more complicated.
Yeah, it's different than just plunking your bait down and hoping that the trout are going to come in and eat it. So that really gets to why I like it, because there's just so much more that goes into it, and it engages you.
Can we talk about like the community aspect and kind of like that camaraderie? Camaraderie.
I guess this community stuff overrated. That was a joke for those of you in Rio Linda. Nah, we love it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I love to fly fish is the relationship I have with my dad and my brothers wouldn't be what it is today without fly fishing. In fact, can you hit that button here in a second? Because I'm going to talk about the Lower Provo. Oh, dang it! Oh, shoot!
Sorry.
So we were on that river. It was me, my dad, and Berkeley, and
Wait, which river were you on again?
No, we're going. We're on that river, and there's this big eddy on the side of this deep run.
Right across from the trailer park, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I know
there's
that spot
big
well.
eddy, and there's this big old brown trout just sipping bugs. And so I started to wade across. I'm like, I was probably like 20, probably like 30 feet away. And I just wasn't getting the right drift. So I took a couple steps forward. Wasn't getting the right drift. I'm like, oh, maybe I got to go upriver a little bit. Took a couple steps forward. Still just wasn't getting that drift. Like there was that little micro drag, that the fish, he was kind of interested, but he knew it was a bug or a fake bug. So I took a couple steps forward, and next thing I know, I am up to my neck in water. Like it was a ledge. I just fell right in, and I start floating down the river, and I look over at my dad in Berkeley, and I go, "What do I do?" And my dad looks at me and he goes, "Swim."
That sounds like Craigster.
Yeah. But that's like an inside joke that we have all the time, where my dad will look at me and he'll go, "What do I do?" And we just bust up laughing because it was so funny. And
that's awesome.
Just memories like that, where you're out on the river, you have an awesome day, and you're all at the truck, and you're like, man, that was a blast. And you talk about it for years. Like, we talk about epic days on the river that happened 5, 6, 10 years ago, like it was yesterday.
Yeah. Well, I really like that, Alex. And I think part of it too is the fact that you're outside with them, right? You're out in the wild, in the wilderness, experiencing things for yourself, experiencing the natural world, realizing that a caddis doesn't bite. It's one of the best things in the world. When you got caddis and mayflies all over you, and you realize that they don't bite and they just want to hang out on you, you're like, oh, this is great.
#blessed.
Yeah, it really is. It's the best hatch. I think, it wasn't John Girac. I think it was Gary LaFontaine who wrote that what a tourist deems a plague of insects, a fly fisherman calls a good hatch. And that's 100% true.
That's awesome.
When you get into it. But I really love the interacting with nature part of it. Everybody, well, if you've listened to this show before, you know how much I love to fish dry flies, how that's my favorite thing. And when you're in the middle of a dry fly hatch and you're watching them come off, you're trying to throw the right fly at the right time. You're trying to match that. It's such a more intimate experience with the natural world than what you get from other forms of fishing. You're trying to imitate these tiny little food items. You start to recognize a lot of things that you would normally miss. You're understanding what an emerger eat looks like versus eating a dun, or how if you throw a real life grasshopper off the bank, you can watch a trout come eat it.
Yeah.
Like that's from you get to watch nature at its most unaware. And that's a really rare thing to have happen, when you can be in the natural world and watch the natural world work and have the natural world either not care that you're there or be completely unaware that you're there. I was out hunting elk a few years ago, and we were on this one ridge, and we glassed up a nice bull on a ridge, 1,500 yards away. So we were getting ready to put the stock on him, and there was a saddle in between the two ridges that we had to hike down and get into. And we start walking down our ridge to get to the other ridge on that saddle. And my buddy like stops and he's like, dude, stop. And I'm like, what? And he points, and I'm like 200 yards away. And we were downwind, so she didn't know we were there. There's this black bear, just sitting on her haunches, just going to town on what was left of a deer. I mean, she's got blood spattered up her muzzle, right? And we can hear like the cracking of the bones and the tearing of the meat. And she's just going, she's like, like me at a wing platter, man. She was just, it was awesome.
I can imagine that now.
Yeah, you've been there before. Yeah, unfortunately, Alex has taken me to a few wing joints in his time.
That's why we can't afford guide trips.
That is not why we can't afford guide trips. All right, you're the one that has to eat the name brand protein bars all the time. That's what's really doing us in.
No comment.
But no, getting to watch that bear, dude, that was so freaking cool. And she had no clue we were there. She didn't care because she was focused on something. And you get to see the natural world do that stuff. So from like the naturalist standpoint, I really love that.
And that feels like an adventure.
Yeah, it is.
Like you can watch stuff like that on TV and you can go on a walk at the park, but until you really like go out in the mountains and experience something like that, experience those hatches, experience those fish smacking dry flies, like that's an adventure. And in that post we did on YouTube, it was, why do you fly fish? The large majority of people, 52% of people said the reason they like to fly fish is get outside, get off the grid. It's an adventure. And I just don't feel like that's very prevalent in today's world, is just getting outside. Just with our phones, with our computers, a lot of our jobs, you have to be on the computer. I mean, we're editing and we're coming up with emails and social media posts and
a lot of work.
Coming up with products and things like that, a lot of research. And so we're in front of the computer a lot of time. And so when we're able to get outside and get off grid, like I love not having service on my phone because there's just no temptation there. There's no distraction.
It's fantastic.
Like literally my phone is not going to work right now. I got to pay attention to this bug that's flying through the air.
Yeah.
So
it's fantastic. So, I love it. I love it. So hopefully that seduced you, Warwood, to get off your rock and go try it. Cause that's really what it is for both me and Alex. And I think for a large majority of anglers too. I mean, to get 52% of people to agree on anything in 2024, I mean, at the very least, it's worth trying, I think, for the adventure aspect, which I think Warwood touched on a little bit. He got that big old Arctic grayling, which I'd like to know where you caught that in the Uintas, because there's only a few lakes that produce big Arctic graylings. So let's chat later. And anyways, we should probably should have.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. In the Uintas. Yeah. Oh, darn. I messed it up again. We got to get an intern for the censoring. I'm sorry, folks. I deeply apologize. The last thing I would ever want to do is tell somebody about a fishery that is just so unknown and untrammeled and unique and untouched and spotless and perfect and litter-free as the Uinta Mountains in northern Utah. I'd hate that.
I mean, I would think the Uinta Mountains is better than a lot of the other rivers near populated areas and college towns.
Yeah, but it's hardly this untouched, pristine wilderness.
I think if you get back in there far enough.
If you get back in there far enough, you're going to find my piles of puke from a couple of years ago.
I've heard that story. Another time.
Another time for that story.
Quite an adventure.
Oh, yeah. Food poisoning 9 miles deep is not fun. But anyways, other than, food poisoning 9 miles deep in the middle of nowhere, what other challenges are you going to face when you get into fly fishing? Because I think that's kind of a stumbling block for people. Because they're like, oh, yeah, this sounds really cool. I want to do it. And then they go and they look at it, and the barrier to entry feels so high.
Well, that's the number one thing is I tell people, I have an online fly fishing company. And people go, oh, I love fly fishing. But, man, it's just so hard to get into. I don't even know where to start. And it's true. Like we just talked about how it's a little bit more complicated. There's a lot more to it than just grabbing a rod and some worms and some power bait and chucking it out there. And so I think that there are 3 main challenges that people are going to face when they get into fly fishing. And number 1 is, what gear do they need?
All of it. That is the answer.
Coming from the gear junkie. Everyone, he has 36 fly rods. He does not need...
No.
Oh, is it more?
42. 42 fly rods. I've added a
Holy
few.
cannoli. That is...
I got to sell some at some point.
Yeah, so we can afford guide trips.
Yeah. You need all of the gear that is included in our starter pack. That's what you need.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason that we came up with our starter packs is we wanted to make it really easy. I mean, we started with fly collections, right? Which was solving a problem. You get into fly fishing. I need flies. What do I need? You go to the bins at your sporting goods store, your fly shop. There's thousands of patterns. Yep. You're completely overwhelmed.
And at a lot of fly shops, if you ask, there's kind of sometimes there could be a bit of a... it can be very intimidating.
I've actually had nothing but good experiences in fly shops.
I've had a few.
Okay.
Where I didn't want to ask them for any kind of help.
Yeah.
Because they just look at you with kind of that content. They were all in Montana too, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But
I mean,
no, most fly shops aren't like that though. But I can understand the intimidation side of it, where you're like, I'm a little like, these people know everything. I'm gonna look like an idiot. Like, hey, we all look like idiots at some point all the time. Even the guy in the fly shop. Trust me. I mean, I look like an idiot on the daily, and people still trust me.
Yeah, you worked in a fly shop, so if you can do it, anyone can.
Exactly.
But we came out with the fly collections because we wanted to give people a base of flies that they could just buy it, go out to the river, and start catching fish. Sorry. But then we started getting questions like, okay, I have the flies, but what else do I need? And I came to the point where I was sending 20 different links to 20 different websites for all the things that you needed to start fly fishing. And we're like, well, let's just make this simple. We're going to come out with our own little starter pack. And so that's what it is. It's everything you need to start fly fishing. Yep. It doesn't come with waders and boots. You don't technically need them. It is going to make your experience out there a little easier. You're going to be able to walk through the river a lot easier, and it's going to be more comfortable, but you don't need them. You can wet wade. You can get some shoes that are waterproof, and you can head out there if it's warmer.
Yeah.
But the starter
pack,
pack,
the pond, you can fish a lake. Yeah.
The starter pack has everything else you need to get started. And so we tried to solve that problem. Yep. So challenge accomplished.
Done. I think another challenge they're going to face is the skills that you need to fly fish, because you got to know how to fly cast, and that trips a lot of people up because it's a different set of skills, a different set of skills than conventional fishing, because you're not keeping that line aloft in conventional fishing, whereas in fly fishing you've got to keep that line in the air until you're ready to put it down. It's just different. And fly fishing is hard to learn. I think fly casting is relatively easy to pick up. You can usually pick that up within a half hour, 45 minutes of practicing. You can start to feel the fly cast.
But then, I mean, casting in a park or even just on like a lake is, as soon as that line hits the water on a river, that's a whole nother learning curve. Because then you got to learn how to manage line.
You got to mend it. Yeah. Mend it. You're always going to be mending that fly line, right? But it's not broken. Yeah, still mend it, right? It will challenge you. It's going to push you when you learn how to fly fish. So if you don't like that, you're not going to like fly fishing, I don't think. If you don't like to be pushed, and if you don't like to be constantly trying to learn something new, fly fishing is probably not right for you, because that's what it requires of you. Something else to be completely aware of, it really can take over your life if you get into it. I let that happen for a few years, and that wasn't necessarily a good thing. A lot of the reason I'm fat now is because of the years where I spent 3 or 4 years in a row where I was on the water 250 days a year.
Whoa.
Yeah. And when you're on the water that much.
How many days a week is that? Like 4 or 5?
4 or 5 a week.
Wow.
Yeah. You'd think I'd be better at it by now, right? Alex is like, there's no way this is true. I've seen him fish. This is a lie.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was great, but like I was eating.
Did
like,
you ever
crap.
get sick of it?
There were a couple of times where I told my buddies, like, I'm done. I'm never doing this again.
Because I think if I did it that much,
Yeah.
I don't think I'd enjoy it as much.
Yeah, but I also had nothing going for me in my life at that point.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't married. I wasn't dating anybody. I'd quit going to church. So I had this giant hole that I was trying to fill with fly fishing.
Okay.
So I had no relationship with God, no relationship with really much of my family at all at that point. I went through my butthead phase a little later in life than I think a lot of folks do. And really the only person I had a relationship at that point with was my grandma Pat, who would always want to hear about my fishing stories when I got home. And that was literally it, because I was living in her basement. Right? I was living in my grandma's basement, fishing 250 days a year. Like, that sounds really glamorous in some ways, but at the same time, it was really awful.
Okay.
And it was like the only thing that I had going for me. So you don't want it to get to that point. Moderation is key. I probably fish 150 days a year now. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more. It really kind of depends. Teaching the last couple of years, I've fished a little bit less, just because, I'm teaching all those munchkins, getting them learned up good in English. So getting them ready for their after high school lives, and that's been good too. But it's just different. So moderation's key. Don't let it overtake your life, because it's very easy for that to happen.
It's a good call.
Yeah.
And then I think number 3 is you got to figure out where to fly fish.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah. And I was actually listening to the podcast this week. It was all about casting.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the Q&A questions, the guy was talking about fishing for crappie and bluegill, and I think he even said like catfish and stuff.
Mhm.
And you talked about fishing for carp. And so I think a lot of people, when they get into fly fishing, they think it's just trout.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't have much experience other than trout. That's just not something I've done very often.
We'll get you into some carp this year. Don't worry.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Just don't touch them. They're gross.
Yeah, they are kind of nasty. But I mean, I've seen the videos where I've been bone fishing, and they talk about how carp are the bonefish of fresh water. They just like kind of fight like bonefish. I don't know if that's true, but
I don't know, because I've never caught a bonefish. Okay. So yeah, I wouldn't be able to
the videos look pretty similar. Like, they just go nuts.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you need to live near the Rocky Mountains or any of those East Coast rivers, or
everybody should move to Iowa is what Alex is trying to get at here.
But there's so many places to fly fish, and that you can fly fish for pretty much any species you want. And so,
except piranhas. Wouldn't recommend that. You might lose a finger.
But I will say trout fishing is a freaking blast, and you get to go to some really pretty places if you want to find those high mountain streams and catch those cutthroat and have that experience. But it is a challenge to try and find places to fish that maybe you want to get off grid a little bit more, have that adventure. It can be intimidating trying to find places to fish. And so I guess you love to find places to fish. You love to go on those adventures. What are some tips you would give to help people find places to fish around them?
I mean, go to a fly shop. And if you don't have a fly shop nearby, then go to your local big box store, because almost every big box outdoor store has a fishing reports board somewhere, or they have a fishing department, and chances are the guy in the fishing department knows a thing or two about fishing, I would hope, so they can point you somewhere. And then I think, I can't speak, I know the western states all have, the state wildlife agencies all have some sort of state-run fishing report and like stocking reports. They'll tell you where they're putting fish.
So just Google like fishing report your state.
Yeah. And you can find something there. Orvis has a really good network of fishing reports for a lot of places to fish across the country. So you can always look there as well. There's a lot of resources. If you just put in 10, 15 minutes on Google, you're going to find something.
But I would say that the number one thing is you have to actually go check them out.
Well, yeah, you got to check them out first. But if you don't want to like waste the gas money or the time to go somewhere where there's not fish, which I understand that because I get that way sometimes.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of people like they might be working that 9 to 5,
Yep.
and so they have limited time, and they want to make. I mean, they want the biggest bang for their buck.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, that they can't afford to go get skunked and whatnot.
I will say that is part of the fun, though. It makes finding those places more rewarding.
It does. It does, but you got to be in the right mood for it, I think, more than anything else.
Agreed.
Because there's some days where I'm going to go explore. I don't care that I just drove 300 miles and burned all that gas and didn't even touch a fish. And then there's some days where if that was what happened, I would just be so frustrated at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I've got to be in the right mindset for it. Like that trip we took the end of last summer out there in Nebraska. Right there in the very mountainous region of Nebraska, right?
No idea what you're talking about.
Where we found that awesome tiny little creek.
You're being too cryptic.
That tiny little creek.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like, me and Alex were driving
right on the outskirts of Nebraska.
Yeah, right on the outskirts of Nebraska. And we were driving to this one river that we'd heard about.
Yeah.
And we get there, or we didn't even get there yet because we passed a sign and it was like Blue Creek or whatever. I can't even remember if that was the name of it. I don't know. But it was like Blue Creek or Red Creek or whatever creek it was. And it was seriously like a foot wide.
That was tiny.
But the fact that it was named and there was like a fish information sign right there, we pulled off and we're looking and it's like artificial flies only. And we're like, huh? And what did we find in that little stream, Alex?
Yeah, we peeked over the sides of the bushes and we could see fish in this thing.
Yeah.
And it was so fun because we're like, well, we got to try it.
Yeah.
So we tied on an elk hair caddis, and I think Spencer was the first to go. And you couldn't even see the water because the weeds were so tall.
And if you got too close, they'd spook.
Yeah.
So you had to like crouch behind the weeds and just throw it over, and you just had to listen.
It was so you just hear this big splash, and then they would like set the hook on themselves.
Yeah.
They were kind of nuts, and
it was.
That was so fun.
It was, and they were good size fish.
Good size.
Yeah, so that like you'll find stuff like that if you're willing to go out and just explore a little bit.
Totally.
But you got to be in the right mindset for it too, because
I think that'll come later in your fly fishing journey. Like if you're just starting out, I think you want to catch fish, and that's what's going to propel you to then maybe start adventuring out and finding new places.
Yeah.
And I think you become a little bit more patient and you're out there for more of the adventure than you are to catch fish. So
yeah. Well, other than trial and error, what other solutions? Like other than just going out and trying it, like what other solutions exist? If you've listened to this whole thing and you've decided, yeah, I'm gonna try fly fishing, I'm doing it right now. Like what
steps would people take?
Yeah, what other steps could folks take?
So if you don't have the gear, I highly recommend the starter packs. Like I'm not just saying that because like we have this company. I genuinely believe that it is the best solution to getting the gear that you need to fly fish. It's the easiest and fastest way to do it.
And that was my thought before, because I wasn't even working for you guys when I reviewed the starter pack a while ago. And that was my consensus at the end of it too, was and then our relationship evolved into me coming on and being part of the team here. But
and we're always trying to improve it too.
Yeah.
Like we just redesigned the rod. We're working on a new bag that's just higher.
I might actually wear this sling pack.
And he loves chest packs.
Yeah.
And like we've improved the reel. We're working on a new pair of nippers that are just more durable and they'll last longer. They'll stay sharper for longer. Like we have the attitude of trying to improve everything that we do here. And so if you grab that, you now have the gear.
Yep.
How do you learn the skills? We've been working on a huge project over the last 2-3 years.
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. It feels like 3.
It feels like 3. I mean, it's going to come up on 3 by the time they're all released.
It probably will. Probably will be, yeah.
The Beginner Fly Fishing Masterclass. It's on YouTube. It is A to Z, how to start fly fishing, step by step. If you watch that and you try to just soak in that knowledge and go apply it on the river, you're going to be light years ahead of anyone that doesn't have that.
Yeah. And we've got a podcast too. This little podcast that we're on right now.
Yeah, Spencer.
Untangled.
How cool is this? Spencer went an entire year, didn't miss a week. doing the podcast.
That's true, huh?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
It was like,
this is what, episode 68? Have we missed a week yet?
we haven't.
No.
Since we started, Spencer.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But like, if you guys have questions, reach out.
Yeah.
Like, submit questions. He answers questions every week. If you,
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, we have a little contact form on our website. We also have in our weekly newsletter that has all of our videos and stuff in it. There's links. There will be one in the description where you can submit a question for the podcast. But if you don't want to wait and you just want to get a quick answer, you can go to the contact us form on our website. And like, we love to answer questions. We love to hear what you're thinking. And we want to be a resource for beginners.
And that's the best way to get a hold of us other than the Pony Express.
Smoke signals are also
acceptable, yes.
If it's not windy.
Yeah. Don't leave Instagram comments, though, because we can't always guarantee that we're going to get to all of those. Same with the YouTube comments. Like, we try to get to all of them, but sometimes we don't. So the best way to get in touch with us is the Contact Us page. That will ensure that we see it. If that happens, usually Devin sees it, and then Alex sees it, and then I see it. So 3 of us see it. Sometimes Berkeley even sees it too. So sometimes the whole team gets to see it if you send it in that way. So that would be what I suggest.
But long story short, we're here to help.
Yep.
Like,
we
love helping anglers. This is fly fishing for everyone. And so if you have a question, reach out.
Yeah. Well, I think that wraps us up today. What do you think?
Yeah. Let's go fish.
I couldn't.
Let's go have an adventure.
Let's do it.